on Acast and wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Rebalance with Kamal Santamaria.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Rebalance, and I've got two words for you this week. Prevailing, narrative. Not the most exciting words in the world, I will grant you that, but when it comes to pretty much everything we consume these days in terms of news and information, there is, more often than not, a prevailing narrative. It is the general consensus. It is often perpetuated, if not created, by the media. It ends up standing on the record as quote-unquote what happened. And if you don't think it or say it, then you're in the minority, if not the wrong. And that might be okay if it hadn't become so very fraught and often detrimental to push back with the views and even the facts from the other side. What am I on about? Well, this week, it's Ukraine, actually. A situation where the prevailing narrative appears so simple and so clear. That is, Russia invaded Ukraine and there's been a war for 3 years as a result, that to push back against it would be almost sacrilege. And let me say this up front, I am not someone who believes there is anyone responsible for this war other than Russia and its President Vladimir Putin. When you invade another country, you are the aggressor. Like Iraq invading Kuwait in 1990, or indeed Iraq being invaded by the United States and its so-called coalition of the willing in 2003. It is pretty much black and white. But there is also, if not some grey, then at least another side to things. There is context, there is history, there can be, some would claim, extenuating circumstances. So that's almost my challenge this week. Can we rebalance what's happening in Ukraine? Can another narrative be explored and reasoned with in the face of such an obvious enemy and a universal hero?
Rebalance with Kamal Santamaria.
After many initially doubted his capabilities as a wartime president, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky has emerged as a hero in his nation and around the world.
It's really wonderful. You're my hero. You're amazing. Yes. No.
When the world thinks of Ukraine, they think of heroes fighting the odds.
And President Zelensky is a modern-day hero. He's a war hero and he deserves support.
I just want to express my gratitude to the film festival for including a hero of our times.
Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, is a hero. He's a hero because he stayed in Kyiv when the Russians invaded. He rallied his nation behind him and its armed forces. He stood up to Vladimir Putin and is, 3 years later, still standing. On that, the world already agreed. But then, on a trip to Washington, Zelensky got metaphorically beaten up in the White House Oval Office by its new occupant, President Trump, and his deputy, Vice President Vance.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. You're in no position to dictate.
I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with World War III.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards.
It was an ambush, a public argument the likes of which we'd never seen in this revered setting. And with it, Zelensky's heroism was enshrined.
I thought it was quite an extraordinary press conference, and we all need to remember that President Zelensky is a hero. He represents the Ukrainian people's strength and their resistance to an authoritarian regime that is trying to destroy them. He needs all of the support that he can get, and I think that it is inappropriate to conduct that kind of disagreement in front of cameras. The only person who benefits from that is President Putin.
That was Kemi Badenoch, leader of the UK's opposition Conservative Party. And really, I only need to play that one clip, because dozens of other leaders from all over the world said the same thing. Those who spoke were unanimous in their praise. But there was something in the way Badenoch phrased her praise that really caught my ear.
We all need to remember that President Zelensky is a hero.
We all need to remember he is a hero. Not, I think he's a hero, or I believe he's a hero. Remember. Like it's a fact that shouldn't be forgotten. It's like what I said earlier. And if you don't think it or say it, then you're in the minority, if not the wrong. And you need to show it too. As we know, actions speak louder than words.
Prime Minister Starmer leaving 10 Downing Street, walking towards Zelensky to welcome him. The two embraced, they shook hands, had smiles, and then before entering Downing Street, they sort of stood there, had a little banter, smiling, shaking hands before going inside.
You're very, very welcome here in Downing Street. As you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom. And we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may.
What struck me is the way Zelensky has been feted without question. Possibly more because of the West's abhorrence of Vladimir Putin than its love of Zelensky. At least that's the way it was initially. You know, we're often reminded of Donald Trump's reality TV roots, but let's not forget Zelensky was a comedian who became president and could easily be viewed as someone who wasn't suited to the job. Now, since the invasion, he has been inspirational, definitely. But what few seem willing to ask is whether maybe there is something Zelensky needs to do, or should have done, or could have done differently to create a better outcome for his own people. The war in Ukraine has gone on for more than 3 years. On the battlefield itself, estimates say a minimum of 172,000 Russian troops have been killed, with 611,000 wounded, 376,000 of them seriously. Ukrainian troop losses are put at 43,000. Zelensky himself said that in December. While on a civilian level, the United Nations says 12,600 people have died in Ukraine, with more than 29,000 injured. And that's just verified casualties. The real number is likely much higher. These are catastrophic losses. From a war which has its roots in Russia's concern that Ukraine wanted to join NATO. Now that's not a reason to invade, but it is why it happened. Everyone has their red lines, and for Russia, it was the idea of Ukraine, a country on its border, being part of what is essentially an anti-Russian alliance. Zelensky always knew this, and the West knew that he knew this, and where it could lead. But it spotted an opportunity to extend its footprint in Europe. It dangled NATO membership in front of Ukraine repeatedly, and upon his election in 2019, effectively enlisted Zelensky into the whole plan. Author and journalist Jonathan Cook summed this up succinctly in an article for Middle East Eye recently. This is a paraphrased version of what he said.
Zelensky's job was to play a game of chicken with Moscow. Either Putin's bluff would be called and Ukraine would be welcomed into NATO, or Putin would finally make good on his years of threats to invade his neighbor, to stop NATO crossing the reddest of red lines he'd set over Ukraine. Washington could then cry self-defense on Ukraine's behalf, arm Kiev to the hilt, rather than seeking a rapid peace deal. And so began a proxy war of attrition to wear Russia down militarily and economically, and bring about Putin's overthrow. Zelensky did precisely what was demanded of him, and for his obedience was faked a hero, the defender of Europe against Russian imperialism. His every demand, demands that originated in Washington, was met.
So is Zelensky a hero for simply not being the bad guy? Or for doing Washington's bidding? Did he fall into a trap that was set just for him? As Cook points out, Moscow was never going to accept NATO missiles on its border, just like the US couldn't accept Soviet missiles in Cuba in the early 1960s. But Zelensky put all of Ukraine's eggs in NATO's basket, and it played a big role in leading to a war. Yes, the US has backed him and Ukraine since then, but 3 years later, we're seeing how everything can change so very, very quickly, depending on who sits in that Oval Office where the hero was so publicly torn down.
The Balance. Journalism without agenda.
So there you go, a different take on the war in Ukraine, not aimed at attacking Zelensky any more than he has been, but just giving a little more background and context to how he has been used, quite frankly, and how heroism comes with strings attached. That's it for this week's Rebalance, and did you notice something not Trump-centric at all? Although, of course, he did make an appearance because it's 2025 and that's how things work. Do drop me a line, if you like, on social media at The Balance Feed. Email us kamal@thebalance.website, and we always welcome comments on our YouTube channel, where this podcast is uploaded every week. It's on YouTube Music, if you use that. Actually, YouTube's been great recently. Lots of new viewers checking out the shorts, which I've been putting up. TV Guy finally converted to vertical video. Talk to you next week.
Rebalance is a production of the Balance.website and is brought to you by Acast. For more, visit shows.acast.com/rebalance.